Ready? 2:30?
Kick it off.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I'm here to introduce the speakers for the Texas Women Taking Landscape Leadership by the Horns. My name's Cecilia, and I am serving as part of the committee. We're really excited to have you here today. I'm just going to briefly introduce everyone and have you guys sort of talk about your work and yourselves. So we have Ann Coleman, a partner and founder at Coleman & Associates, so welcome. Christy Tanaik, founding principal at Tanaik Landscape Architecture. Elizabeth Gilbert, managing principal at Clark Condon, welcome. Margaret Robinson, founder and managing principal at Azekura Robinson. And Rebecca Leonard, founder and CEO of Lionheart. And also we have our moderator, Marissa McKinney. Welcome, and I hope you guys enjoy the chat. Thanks.
Well, we are going to there we go. Now I'm on. We're going to kick this off, I think, with a little bit of introductions from each of our lovely ladies taking landscape leadership by the horns here. We'll start with Margaret. We'll just go straight on down the line. I think we organized ourselves, too. This is really coming together. I'm really, all right, so
We change this. Oh, there we go.
we'll kick it off with Margaret.
Great. I get to go first. Thank you guys for having us, and thank you for whoever instigated this topic. I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to get up here. Is that who it was?
It was Bobby.
Okay,
It was
Bobby.
throw Bobby
Thank
under
you,
the
Bobby.
bus.
Okay, Bobby. No, that was great. I really want to do anything I can to encourage more landscape architects to consider firm ownership as one of their career paths and options. And I especially want to encourage women to consider that option. So to introduce myself, again, I'm Margaret Robinson. I'm a co-founder of Azekura Robinson Company with my partner, Keiji Asakura. We started the firm 18 years ago, two of us at a kitchen table. Now we're close to 50 people across 6 different offices, which is a little mind-boggling to me. But I took the opportunity to do a little research. You can see in the lower right the graph of the people that we've hired over the years. And you can see it was a pretty close race up until about 2015. And then the number of women that we've hired has grown exponentially. And we're now at, I think, 72% women firm-wide. I know in the Austin office, we're now at 100% female, which is not by design, but I'm not going to argue with it. I think it's great. So that may be partially driven by the fact that our firm is a mission-driven firm. We started the firm based on the desire to stay closely tied to our communities, especially communities that don't often have the means or the funds to pursue planning and landscape architecture and design projects, as well as embracing the environment and protecting that as much as we can. So it's been a little bit of a journey. I've had many passions over my career. I can name a few. I mean, I started out totally about mainframe computers. I went to grad school for a couple years in computer programming. That only lasted a little while. And then I ended up in military planning. That is not mission-driven. Wrong type of mission. Then I went back into AutoCAD and instigating that within offices and morphed into master plan communities and subdivision planning, ended up with a land developer. And that's when I hit 45 and I said, no, this is not the direction. It's not the direction I wanted to go. So that's when we started the new firm, and I shifted, I pivoted, and was able to really chase the kind of projects that I really want to and that Keiji really wanted to. which were more based, we started doing lead work, we did sites work, we did green stormwater infrastructure. We're doing evidence-based design, and we're seriously striving to integrate all of the disciplines within our firm, the planning, urban design, landscape architecture, and urban ecology. And that's much harder done than said. It's a constant process. So I'll hand it over to Rebecca.
All right, great. I'm going to start with a question. Does taking Tex Landscape by the Horns, is that a rodeo reference for you Texans out there? Okay. These ladies have been on the whole 8 seconds. I'm still trying to make it out of the chute, so without getting reamed in the wrong spot. So I am Rebecca Leonard. I am the founder and CEO of Lionheart. We are landscape architects, planners, and urban designers. I took a very convoluted path to landscape architecture, and I thought it was really convoluted till I heard Margaret's. But I studied architecture and planning, did that for a number of years, and then after leading a landscape architecture firm, I found myself leading more and more landscape architecture projects and decided to seek a licensure for that. So this was kind of a later in life thing. Learned a lot on the job for me, and so that was my circuitous path to landscape architecture. At Lionheart, our goal and vision is really to stay with fewer clients, but go further with them from the planning phases all the way through detailed design of the public spaces and things there in that development. So we've been leading a number of projects that start as master plans and end up as streetscapes and parks and public spaces.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Garrett Coleman. I have a few slides up here to show you. The lower left-hand corner is my first day of work. I was working for a small landscape contractor in Houston who wanted to open up a design department. And at the time, anybody class of 81 here? Any of my friends show up? Oh, none of my friends showed up. Great. That's true. We're all friends. So I said sure, because he was going to pay me $24,000 a year in 1981 when the starting salary for a landscape architect was $14,000 per year. Yeah, see, I'm way ahead of Christy. Way ahead. And then when I said $24,000, he said, okay, I'll give you a car allowance too of $400 a month. So I left that interview, went and bought myself an Audi. So then it was just me, and this gentleman said, well, you can hire somebody. So I hired an old guy. I was 22, and this guy was 34. So this old man and I started drawing mainly industrial parks for Trammell Crow. I look back now and think how ironic it is that my first client was female. Her name was Nancy Quayle, and she was a big advocate of mine. So about that same time, just a little while in, well, let me digress, because I do that a lot. So in 1981, I graduated from college, but before that, I had already gotten this job. I dated my husband for 3 weeks. We got engaged and married. I became a landscape architect that year, bought a house, and then moved to Austin. I bought a house in Houston and then moved to Austin. And Trammell Crow got an apartment for me and sent me away with just gobs of blueprints in Austin to start working on, because they had heard that there was a landscape ordinance in Austin. And did I know much about a landscape ordinance? Because there wasn't one in Houston. And I said, well, all I can tell you is one of my classmates just took that job as the landscape architect. Her name's Deborah Phillips. She now works for Toro. So that's how I ended up in Austin, was doing permit plans. The upper left-hand corner, we do a lot of work for higher education. We actually span the spectrum. We're more client-centric than project-focused. Let's see, anything in my notes? This is my 40th year of practice. I started when I was 22, so do the math. It's the 35th anniversary of our firm. There was a year called 1987 when this design build firm I was working for had expanded into 3 locations in California, Phoenix, Nashville. We had actually bought out the Las Colinas Landscape Company, and I was hot shit. I was traveling all the time, had babysitters in 3 locations and 2 BMWs, and then the economy burst wide open. Well, I hired Earl Broussard, and so he worked there for about 90 days when the whole thing collapsed. And they shut down the Texas market. Pardon? So you're the reason. So I know I'm taking up a lot of space, but they ended up boogieing to California and leaving me stranded. And Olivia hates it when I talk about the IRS coming after me. And I ended up on national television with Ed Bradley interviewing me and telling the whole story. So that's my story. But just to wrap up where I am today, I'm a proud mother of 3 grown children, all Aggies and employed. The last one just got married. The next one's getting married. He's marrying my marketing director, so that's going to be next month. And Marissa introduced my daughter to an architect, so that's the other real bummer in our family right now. So I think that's it. I'll pass it on to Christy.
Hello. Thanks for having us. Well, my start at landscape architecture, I was thinking about marine biology, horticulture, or architecture. And my parents took me down to A&M's Moody College of Marine Biology, and something must have turned me off that day. I don't know. I do have a vague memory of a boat that didn't look like it was seaworthy. But anyway, I decided against marine biology, and truly, I was going to Texas Tech because my high school boyfriend was there. I was never, hadn't really thought much about what I was going to do with my life. So my mother in the car said, Christy, you look through that book and you pick a major. You are not going undeclared. And so I saw landscape architecture. I said, Mom, this is a perfect mix. I'll do this. And she said, really? And so that's how that happened. But anyway, we've just always been a firm of about 10 to, I think the biggest we ever got was 16 people. But we're more generally around 13. And we just like working on interesting projects. And our mission is probably what everybody's mission in this room is, to connect the urban dweller with nature and each other. And that's what we try to do. So thank you.
Thanks. So Elizabeth Gilbert, I'm with Clark Condon. I'm the managing principal. As a segue to what Christy just said, I had a similar experience at A&M. I went thinking I was going to be an aerospace engineer. And I got there and I'm like, whoa, way too much math and all that stuff. So I too flipped through that course catalog and came across landscape architecture, and I was like, what is this? This is amazing. So that kind of started my journey. But I left A&M in 2004, graduated, and I started at Clark Condon. And I've been there ever since. And I've got a number of people who work with me who have been there for their entire career, which is, it's unique. And I think that's because we think it's a pretty great place. But what's different also, what you heard about these great ladies here is that they are the the founder of their company. I am not. So we, as of this year, as of January, we are in a firm transition, and myself and 2 partners have bought the founding members out, and so I think I have a different and unique perspective about this piece of it and why we did that. But Clark Condon, we're on our 37th year. And so now we've got a great team of about 23. You can see them in the center there. That was, we did a great company retreat back in September, and that's a picture from that. So they're a great group of people, and we're happy to lead them.
All right. Well, the format of this is we have some pre-described questions, and then we want to make sure we leave enough room at the end in the hopes that y'all will have some follow-up questions as well. So my first question is for Elizabeth and for Margaret and for Christy, so you can get your answers ready. What led you to the decision to own your own business? Margaret, you went first last time. You did a good job, so go for it.
Again?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it was twofold. I mean, one was to do the mission-driven work. That really was probably the biggest catalyst. But I also, at the time, had 2 young children. I've always been trying to find a way to get flexibility into my schedule. I probably changed jobs 3 or 4 times in order to go part-time or to have a flexible schedule or some way to be able to balance raising a family as well as a career. So I think those are the 2.
All right. What about you, Christy? You
So when I was 25, I went on a raft trip down the Colorado River and decided I had to move from Dallas to Arizona. And so when I moved to Phoenix in like 85? Does that sound? Yeah, 1985. There were only like 7 firms in town. And so actually a friend and I that had worked together, I'd worked for a couple of them, Steve Martino, I've worked for wonderful, talented people. But anyway, it just seemed like the thing to do because I knew all the other firms. I'd worked for several of them, and this friend and I just decided to go out on our own together. And that made it much easier, I think, than that was 27 years ago. We stayed together for 2 years, and then we both started our own firm. So I'm celebrating my quarter of a century this year. So yeah, we'd worked for everybody else, knew everybody else, and decided, you know what, we could do this. And so we did. And I am glad that I started with a partner. It made it easier, not as scary.
Elizabeth, how about you?
Great, thanks. So as I mentioned, my story is a little bit different. So yeah, I've, been with Clark Condon for a very long time. We love the work that we do there, and it's sort of a natural progression. And we've kind of flirted around with transition for a while, and how do we do that, and what's the right move. And ultimately, myself, Mary Kylers, who's out here in the audience, and Jason Miller, that's our leadership group, and we're a very tight group, so I would agree with you, Christy, that that's really important in who you're carrying this forward with and who you're trusting on that level. So for us, it was really about, we have devoted our careers to this. We've built wonderful things. We love the company. So it's either we take it and transition it, or it goes to someone else and we have no control over what it's going to be. So for us, it was really about carrying on the legacy and taking it into the future and really shaping it into what we wanted it to be.
Nice. Very nice. So our second question is a pretty easy one. And we're going to start with Rebecca. What are some pros and cons of being your own boss?
Well, I think the pro is you get to decide what the projects are you go after and how you run every project. And although I come from, places where there was a lot of freedom there's still a methodology or a history or something with that company. And so with your own, there's not as much baggage about that. So the downside is that exact same thing, which is there are not as many systems in place either. So I remember 3.5 years ago when I hired my first employee, they were like, how do I do an expense report? And I was like, I got to figure that one out, don't I? Like every single thing, you have to figure out how to do it. And so it is quite exhausting to do that. And, because when you're starting your own company, oftentimes you are kind of the only leader of that company. It is kind of a lonely place to be, too. You can't just go and talk to everybody about, like, how tired you are, how much you worked all weekend and things like that, because that's just no fun to sit around and dwell on, right? But one thing that's cool about this panel is these guys get that. And, so what I have found in the last 3 to 5 years is really surrounding myself with other small business owners has been hugely helpful. We share things with each other. You know, where do you get your insurance from? Or here's, or how do you save time doing this? The other day, so I helped with an organization called WXLA, which is a nonprofit. We just got our nonprofit status, and it's a gender justice nonprofit, and we send mid-career women to the ASLA conference, and hoping to soon spin off to CELA and other conferences as well. But we were at an event in Nashville last fall, and they said, "Oh, we're in the California chapter," and I was like, "Wow, we have a chapter? Oh, wow, we didn't even know we had a chapter." And it turns out a group of California women business owners had discovered that they needed to talk to each other about things. And so they got together. They meet once a month, and I've attended several of their calls. It's hugely therapeutic, if nothing else, but also just operationally sharing information and in a very collaborative way. So.
All right, Anne, what about you? Some pros and cons of being your own boss.
All of my pros start with the letter F, and all of my cons start with the letter F.
Of course they do. Of course they do. I'm surprised it's not a poem.
But first, I'd like to say something several people have heard me say over and over again. I do not own my own business. My business owns me. I think everybody's shaking their head. So you mentioned freedom. And I thought about writing the word freedom, but it really doesn't feel free when you have this much responsibility. You learn to live with it. It becomes, and you do have support systems. I've had these lovely women. Jan and I have been work wives for 25 odd years, maybe 26, and everybody else, including Marissa on this panel, and Ashley, and I can name several, and John, have helped moderate that feeling of kind of being by yourself that you mentioned. So flexibility is the word that came to mind. Freedom, but really it was the flexibility of being able to just not have to, I don't want to use the word answer to somebody, but just scramble my egg the way it best suited my family and myself. So I think that flexibility was the one I adored the most and still do. Family, I was able to raise 3 children and work, and Jan, we did the same thing. I mentioned earlier when Earl and Jan and I were having lunch today, that when Jan had her twins, I was blown away, because I'm like, okay, I'm going out of business. Or we're going out of business. And so we actually put Jan's nanny on payroll, which is not illegal, because she was doing, 90% of the work, the construction document work, and other work, and I just knew I couldn't survive without her, and it just made sense for both of us to do that. So, being able to be flexible with family needs. Fun, we talked a little bit about culture today too, and I like to have fun. I love people. I know we all share that sentiment, but you are able to embed that into your culture. And when there are some companies that we talked about earlier, like the one that my son-in-law works for, where it's a very corporate culture, and I knew that I didn't have the personality for that, so we developed our own culture. Financial control, I mentioned the issue I had with that company I was working for and got into trouble, and I said I'm never going to subject myself to that again. We didn't talk about finances much, but I just said from then on, I'm going to always have somebody helping me in the office with finances, so that allows us to reach our mission and what we like to, what our passion is and what we love to do, without worrying about all of that stuff. Wendy comes in and tells us when I have trouble. Other than that, I don't want to hear about it, so I can do our job. The last one is friends. But many of us in this room. The cons, financial control. The pro is financial. The pro, but it's also a negative of knowing and taking seriously every day that the individuals, we have 13 people too, the individuals rely on our financial health for their livelihood and even their sanity. No one wants to go to work knowing there's financial trouble. They just want to do their jobs and know that we're taking care of that. Fear of failure. I have that every day. I think it's self-explanatory. But when you own your own business, you carry that load. I think all the women sitting here and men in leadership positions, when something goes really, really wrong, you don't get a project that you really, really wanted. Employees leave. You have bad moments. You feel like you let your people down, and you take it on when you're in a leadership position in a big way. Future, what to do with me? I've been there now for... We laugh, but it's true. I mean, when you love what you do and you don't work to live, you live to work, how do you phase yourself out in a way that benefits everybody?
Well, I don't have the answer on that one, but we're looking for it. Well, I would say, what Ann said is pretty great. I've never had kids. I don't know why, but I won't get into it. I have a theory that there were too many deadlines, and I was always stressed out, so never able to conceive. But other people have conceived while working for me. So there. But yeah, no, I mean,
I'm glad you're not male saying that.
yeah, that's right, that's right. But yeah, I agree on the financial part of it. I've actually made a good living, and I am sort of shocked that I have. So I recommend it to you all to go out there and not that it's been about the money. It really hasn't. It's been about the work. At least for me, the work and the camaraderie of people in the office. But it is lonely. The times of failure are the lonely, and thank God we have our husbands. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how much to add to it, but that's probably.
What about you, Elizabeth? Pros and cons.
Anybody else?
Elizabeth?
Pros and cons.
Y'all are making me scared. I'm kind of regretting my decision here. Actually, not. It's actually not true. I mean, these are all things that we thought about. Again, for us, the challenges are a little bit different because what we've taken is something that's very much alive and running. It's off the ground. And it's a matter of how do you carry that forward? How do you, you've got to think about the employees constantly, making sure that they're comfortable with change. This is a big change. And then also, there's a lot of pressure to make sure that they get all the same perks that they've had historically. So I think that's one of the things that's very much on my mind all the time. The pros of it, though, however, are very much that, you get to help shape and grow the projects, but also the employees. You do get that freedom of control of kind of chasing the things that you're most interested in. So there's a lot of great things about it.
All right, we talked a little bit. I heard, when we were putting together questions, I heard this thing about off-ramps in your career. So we're all on the freeway, we're all going, we know where we need to go, but sometimes like when traffic is really bad, you're like, okay, I'll just like get off here and like skirt around and find a different way. So what are some off-ramps, Rebecca, that you have been presented with in your career that you took or didn't take? And how did that affect where you are now?
Okay. In about a 10-year period, less than that, it was about a 6-year period, we had almost all the off-ramps that are typical for people, what would drag them off the career path. Husband got cancer, spent 5 years going to MD Anderson, every month. Had a baby, which was wonderful, but also a lot of effort, especially with all the travel that me and my husband, who's also a working father, and definitely one that puts 100% into the family. Each of us had a parent die. Our other parents went a little cuckoo for about 2 or 3 years each. And so any one of those would have been, an off-ramp, could have been an off-ramp. And, we just kind of muscled through. It was like, it's kind of like the, million-mile march or something. We just kind of like focused. We're just going to do this. So those were a bunch of off-ramps we didn't take. But I did take an off-ramp, obviously. I'm starting my own firm, and one of the things that was challenging about that off-ramp is that it took me a while to kind of come down, and I didn't realize kind of the mental health challenges I was having before, with that kind of laser focus. It took a while to kind of come down from that. I had a year and a half non-compete because of that off-ramp. And I was so mad about that because it was like, I felt like that was going to put me in a place that a lot of women feel when they take time off from maternity leave or anything, is like, I'm going to be marginalized now, you know? But I'm so glad I had it because it gave me time to kind of come to grips with, like, you know, what do I want the next chapter? What do I want the next half of my life to be? And so, you know, I think that's how I dealt with off-ramps. Sometimes I didn't deal with them, and I should have, and sometimes I dealt with them, and it wasn't pretty, but we made it through, so.
Elizabeth, how about you? What are some off-ramps that you've taken or not taken, and how has that affected your career?
So, you know, I think as you're going through your career, you kind of have to stop and evaluate every so often. Am I doing the right thing? Is this fulfilling me? Do I enjoy this? You know, I answered it every time, yes, yes, check, keep going. So my biggest off-ramp was 2018. We were talking about transition. We'd actually, I'd been promoted to principal. Things were great. And then I was diagnosed with cancer. And it was one of those moments where you have to stop and think, truly, you know, are you doing the right thing? Is this it? And I'm gonna mimic what you said, Rebecca, because I think it's important. In reflection, so my company's great. They stood behind me. They were fantastic. It allowed me, I had to take a 6-month leave of absence, and then I came back very slowly. And that time gave me the breathing room that I needed to sort of settle my mind on what was it, what am I doing next, and part of that was I'm committing myself to this company, and we're going to take it from there. So I think those, they're not off-ramps, but they could be. But I think you have to stop and evaluate and take the time to breathe. So.
What about you, Anne? What are some off-ramps you've taken?
The first one is when I chose to go with that design build firm, when the given direction for landscape architects was going to traditional practice. And design build was thought of as being rather shady. You know, clients didn't trust it. There was lack of information on the internet because there was no internet. So clients couldn't look up to see if your prices were fair. So those in the pure profession were saying, don't do design build because you're going to get ripped off. Design and go out to public bid. But we did it anyway, and I take that forward every day. Over that 7-year period, I learned to really appreciate the labor force. I'm talking about the ones that are digging the holes for us. One of our mechanics in the shop was from El Salvador, and I really liked him. He had his family back there. He was sending money home, and he was a surgeon, but had come to the United States, and he was working as a mechanic, keeping our weed eaters going. I mean, it was humbling. So it shaped me in a lot of ways. Vendors are very important to us, you know, learning how things are built. So that was, I would call that an off-ramp, a really huge benefit. The second was when I became unemployed, as I mentioned before. I had a cousin working at GSD&M advertising firm, which was the big thing going on in Austin at the time, and they were expanding their Southwest Airlines account. So I went to interview because I was getting out of landscape architecture. It was too hard, it was too stressful, there was no jobs. So I went to interview with this really old woman. She was probably 40, and she said, she gave me the job. She said pretty much my cousin was vice president. She had no choice. And so I went home, and I started, you know, I was getting kind of mentally prepared. She called me back. She said, I think you're making a huge mistake. I've talked to your cousin about this, and I think you need to find a way to get back in. And so I did. I ended up just, you know, making it work, like we've all said, you know, just dealing with it. And then when I started my own practice, I got kind of lucky because I got to be introduced to Ben Crenshaw, the professional golfer who's won 2 Masters. And he had bought into a turf grass company because he was looking for an exit plan himself. And so being in the golf course design industry, it was a really great move for him. So I ended up selling grass for a while. He gave me a $3,000 a month retainer, which is the equivalent of about $10,000 a month now. And that was great, because all I had to do then, because I had never really worked with other landscape architects, is I called on Sheila Condon. And I said, hey, you want some grass? And she said, yeah, I do. And so I did my own little advertising campaign because the big thing was sodded buffalo grass was coming out about then, and no one had heard of it. And so I came up with my own ad campaign that we put in a golf magazine. It had a picture of a big buffalo in the field, and it says, this ain't no bull, it's buffalo grass. So I did all their marketing pieces, and it was a blast. But then I had, since we're sharing at a level, I think I had a really tragic thing happen too, that several of us had on this panel. I had a baby that passed away at 10 days old. And that was an off-ramp. I decided I didn't want to even show up anymore, but it was the industry friends that I had made along the way. A civil engineer put a desk in his office and said, you just come here and work. Got to pull you out of this. So I think we're all saying the same thing. This industry we've garnered great relationships that pull us through. That's it.
That's it. We had a lot of jokes about Anne selling grass, like a lot. A lot of jokes about it when we were putting this panel together. So it went right about as we had surmised. How has being a woman impacted your career positively and negatively, Margaret?
Well, I can say I think about it less and less as I get older. It's become much less of an issue. So I really do try not to think of things in those terms. I try to just pursue the goals that I want for the company, that I want for myself, and not let the gender conversation really get into it. I'm sure that's a naive approach. I'm sure there's things happening that may sway things one way or the other, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, I need to pursue the things that I want to pursue. You know, my firm I'm a minority partner in our firm, so we're not a WBE, so it hasn't really helped us in that regard. We're a minority business enterprise. So I think, yeah, as time has gone on, it's been less and less of an issue.
Good. What about you, Anne?
We are often seen as an enigma, something interesting. Oh, you own your own firm, where if there's 50 men in the room that own their firm, they don't get that response. So I don't know if that's a positive or negative. It's less and less so, but for a while it was really something that was quite sad. And my favorite that kind of segues into our industry is when you tell people you're a landscape architect, you own your own firm, what do they say? Oh, my wife likes to garden too, can you come look at my backyard? So that kind of went along with that. Being another positive is many men were the greatest mentors and cheerleaders in our firm's success and history. So this is not a not liking men thing at all. In fact, I think in some ways it's just the opposite. Without the men in my life professionally, we would not be successful. So great cheerleaders on that part that have been helpful. Negative, I never got invited to any hunting trips in Argentina. And that conversation would happen right in front of me. Hey, all ready to go? You know, I'm bringing the beer. And I'm just sitting there going, how about coffee on Thursday? You know, so you can't really hang out with the guys, right? It's inappropriate. So these relationships happen. It's the old boardroom thing. And I can't quite come up with a solution for it because women hang out with women and men hang out with women, but there's not a lot of crossover when it goes to that kind of thing. So sometimes I felt we were excluded. I was excluded as a woman, we were excluded as a firm. My favorite story is we had just finished a huge project in Austin, and the only restaurant that was cool at the time was Sullivan's in Austin. That was the place where all the developers went. So I was there with my ski trip group of women. One of the women was a representative, a broker. She represented Lowe's, Randall's, Target. She was hot stuff as a broker, so she was to do in Austin. And then we had a property manager there and another woman. So in other words, we're industry professionals sitting at a table at Sullivan's. In the room, I see my client with all of the other consultants, bankers and vendors, and they're all partying, and they're celebrating the project that we were on, Coleman Associates was on. So what do? I walk over and I say, hello, hey, you know, we're over here. I wasn't invited. No, it's because it was all guys, 100% guys. So I brought the waiter over and I said, I want you to send this check over to him. So they did. They delivered the check to my friend. You know him well, Earl. And he came back over to say hi and put the check right back on the table and walked away. So we were just not seen as significant. I don't know if it was because we were landscape architects and didn't seem significant, even though landscape architecture was a huge component of this project, or if it was Guy's thing. So I don't think that happens as often anymore. I hope you never see it again. So hopefully that kind of bad behavior goes away. But it was a huge negative. It made you feel awkward, but you know, you did it. So I think that's all I had. The double-bladed, I want to bring up the women-owned business thing because it's like what you said, Margaret. You know, we don't really depend on it, but we also weren't one until we were one, and now we're labeled as one. It helps, it hurts. We don't know. We don't know. I think the final analysis, you know, putting the focus on being female, putting the focus on being African American, Hispanic, whatever it is, does it help or does it perpetuate? I'll leave that question hanging because I don't have an answer.
What about you, Christy? Any positives and negatives about being a woman in business?
Well, yeah. You know, I really have not allowed myself to think about it as being a negative. I always thought, you know, all these teams of guys and stuff liked us because we were women. You know, we were a woman had a woman's viewpoint on a project. So, I mean, certainly there have been times, you know, where I'm sure we've been excluded on projects because, you know, I'm not going to work with her. It might have just been more me than being a woman. But, oh God, what else was I going to say? I do think it actually helped me, especially when I was first starting out, to be a women-owned business. That is the only way I think I would have ever gotten into working on campuses. And for sure, I can't imagine that I would have gotten to otherwise. I'm not considered a woman-owned business anymore. I've been taken off the list because I guess I've put money in the bank, you know, and so you're penalized for saving a few bucks. But anyway, I've always been grateful to have the opportunities we've had. And
All right, now we're going to take a dark turn, unless Rebecca wants to go. Oh, right, Rebecca doesn't want to take that softball. All right. Oh, well, the next question is, with burnout on everyone's mind during the Great Resignation, what are some things you've done over your career to optimize work-life fluctuations? Rebecca and Margaret, you can lob this one to one another.
I'm glad you used the term fluctuations instead of work-life balance, because I struggle with that terminology for a couple reasons. One, just, you know, what is balance? Is it, you know, how many hours in a week? Is it half of them at home and half of them at work? I don't know, you know. The other part is time. I mean, if anybody's ever, you know, tried to lose weight, you know, one day you weigh 2 pounds more and the next day you weigh 2 pounds less. And so, you know, it's like balance is not this effortless state. It's, you know, so I don't see it as a panacea really. But I do like, you know, the idea of, the other reason why I struggle with it is because it's like you're investing energy in the boundaries, creating boundaries. I'm gonna, you know, and it's gonna take energy to do that. You're gonna have to say no to some sexy projects. You're gonna have to say no to this or that. And that takes energy. And usually when you're wanting these balance is when you're pretty exhausted. And so what I like to think about is less about the boundaries and more about feeding the fire in the middle, you know, both at home and at work, you know. What is the fuel that makes me want to go home and hang out with my family? What is the fuel that makes me want to have a hobby that, you know, presses back on work? What is the fuel that brings me to the office every day, makes me work through weekends? I've worked all Easter. Don't feel sorry for me. I have my own business. I was doing it because I have a passion about it, you know? So for me, it's about like, find your passions, make sure that your passions are balanced, you know? That if you don't want to be working 900 hours a week or however many there are, that you've got passion somewhere else in your life that pushes back on that. Because if it's all about the boundaries, it just means you don't have passion for something. Because if you have passion, it's going to take over everything else. So if you do want to have a good life balance, focus on the fuel of whatever part's out of balance. And that's, that's been my advice because, again, I got way out of balance. And I think I let a lot of young women who worked for me, I see a couple of them here, get out of balance too because they modeled my behavior. But, I am now promoting, let's have a life, be whole-lifed people, have a family that you love and hang out with friends, hobbies, all that stuff. And that will make all of your other things go better.
It was supposed to go to Margaret,
Oh, Margaret, sorry.
not you.
Okay.
I'm surprised.
Yeah, I had, I guess, a little different take on it. I thought of it in terms of, the things the flexibility that I talked about as a luxury, and communication, virtual communication were no longer luxuries, but requirements during the pandemic. And it was within a week's time, as you know. So I feel like our office was a little ahead of the game because we had multiple offices, so we had to utilize some of those tools before the pandemic, and we were able to just accelerate that much greater during the pandemic. But we too, in addition to my own burnout, just with the weight of the mental, the mental weight of living through that pandemic, where we actually, in 2020, we actually added people. We were growing, because we were growing before the pandemic, and it didn't really stop. So we were still adding people, adding new projects. And so in 2021 is when our staff really started hitting the burnout and started leaving because of burnout. And that was excruciating, of course. And they were leaving, the same way I did when I was 45. They left the firm, they didn't have anything lined up, they were burned out, they didn't know which direction they wanted to go. So I can't throw stones at them. I've been there, I've done that. So we're keeping as many relationships open as possible. We're hiring new people, and yeah, we're gonna get through it. But it's been tough. It's been, after 38 years, you've been through recessions, you've been through a lot of things, but this was one I never really expected.
So the last question for everyone is, what are your words of wisdom to young people in this profession?
Words of wisdom.
Y'all were nonstop talking when I got up here. It was really hard to start this presentation. So y'all have lots
I
of
feel
words
like
of
I've been
wisdom.
talking too much, but no, I would say passion matters most. To me, that's the key. If you can follow that, you'll have all the motivation you'll ever need. Find a mentor and be a mentor. You can do both at the same time. And if you're my age, realize it's okay to let go. We're in really good hands. The next generation of leadership is incredible. So the world is yours.
I saw this social media meme once, and it was a grid of boxes that represented every day of your life, and it had things plotted on there, like average age people get married, average age graduate school's over, average age people die, average age women die. And I remember it just sort of smacked me in my face because I was like, I'm right here on this week, and I was thinking, wow, I'm halfway done with my career, And what do I want to do with what's left, What did I get into this career for? And I've got half the time I had when I started this thing. I better get busy, So I think it's important to take a minute to think about, what is it that when you're at the end of your career, you want to be able to say about what you did. Because time slips by really, really fast, you know? And there's no time like the present to get started on that. You know, the more time you give yourself, the less panic there'll be later on. So, and you'll be super proud of yourself at the end.
Learn how to sell. That's what I would tell the young people. We don't consume ourselves, our own talent. We talk a lot about our talent, our missions, which are all incredibly essential to what we do every day when we wake up and go to bed at night. But young people, you need to learn to sell yourself and your product, because the closer you are to the money, the more you influence the bottom line of your firm through your good works, the more successful you'll be, the more ready you'll be to run your own office when you learn those two things, selling yourself, your finances, how the whole company works. At the same time, be fearless. I lived every day in fear. I still do. I'm dealing with it. You said some of the things that we need to do. Therapy would probably help. Because, and some of it is PTSD of the 80s, the 90s, and the 2008, and owning your own business. But again, you have a wealth of people within your own firm, even those that have come and gone, that you still love, they've contributed in some way. So I'm learning to absorb all of that as a continuum and make peace with it. I don't know what that has to do with young people. That's kind of a personal thing. But just realizing, be fearless, don't live in fear, and make the hard decisions.
That's so true about the fear thing. Feel the fear. I think there's a book called Feel the Fear, but Do It Anyway. You know, I think our profession is such a great one because you really can choose your own path. You don't have to own your own firm. I've definitely worked my blanking ass off my entire career. I'm sorry. It's just, it's been a lot of work, but I've enjoyed it for the most part. Certainly there have been, you know, a few rough spots, and but yes, definitely feel the fear, not to steal yours, but choose your own path. Again, you don't have to own your own firm. You can choose anything. There's so many different things we can do as landscape architects. So I guess choose your own path. Feel the passion, yes, of course, and have fun. The fun part for me is the design work. It isn't, and certainly the camaraderie with people in the office. And this last 2 years has been tough, I will say, because my family's had a health issue. You know, when that happens, it's sort of really, you realize how you need to start channeling energies elsewhere. So this year, hopefully, I'm going to have a partner or two, and looking forward to that and helping the next generation, and this is folding right into you.
Oh, good, thanks. So the thing I would say is landscape architecture it's hard. It's hard work. It's stressful, but it's also extremely rewarding, and I think you have to take the time to really appreciate it. You have to find joy in that, and for me, I love going to one of the parks that I worked on and watching people use it. That's the best feeling in the world, and you don't get that from anything else. So it is absolutely worth it, but you knew, because it is stressful, you need to build a support system. And then the last thing I'd say, if you are interested in the leadership path, you have to understand that leadership isn't something that's given. It's something that you earn. It's something that you have to seek. And, you know, leaders lead. You're not there to build followers, you're there to build other leaders. So if that's a path that you're interested in, start building your skill set early.
All right, we'll have a little bit of story time before we take questions, because I'm going to play off of Elizabeth's. I remember sitting across from Ann at the Satellite Diner. Jan left, she went to go to the bathroom, so I took the opportunity to tell Ann, I want to be you when I grow up. And she said, that's great, but you're going to have to pry it from my cold, dead hands. And I said, okay, sounds great. So now, questions. Do any of you? All right, we have questions. I don't know how I just shouted out.
Yes, I'm wondering if you can speak about the growth trajectory of your firms and just a bit about how you make decisions about how and when to grow the firm.
I know we've had to make decisions when we've started new offices. I mean, even me moving to Austin, most of my career was in Houston. And I decided 8 years ago I wanted to move to Austin. I had family here. I had grandchildren on the way. That was a huge motivator. But since then, we started an office in New Orleans. We've started one in Minneapolis, in Seattle, in San Antonio. And they were all started by people who either wanted to move there or that we wanted to work with and was already there. So I wish I could say it was some kind of great marketing strategy to be in these cities, and it's really not. It's really not. It's really about the people that we wanted to work with were in those cities. And they happen to be great markets. Our office in Minneapolis is really taking off right now. Yeah, it's kind of organic, but that's how it happened.
I think organic's really the way to go. I mean, it's based on leadership capacity, I think. Mostly, I've witnessed both ways, kind of strategic growth, and it was incredibly painful on the leadership of that company. But I've also, and I'm talking Lionheart, some days I walk through the office and it's like the whole way to the restroom is like, yes, no, yes, maybe, I don't know, I'll get back to you. And it's like, I'm ready for someone to be like, I can make this decision, And so I'm just gonna say yes. And then check in with Rebecca maybe later, and see how that went. And I think that's great, So really, I think it's about like, if our growth trajectory is 100% based on the people around me choosing to take up leadership opportunities, we'll grow as fast as that happens.
Both of those are well put. I really didn't want to grow. Christine, I think, I'm pencil on paper. I can't do, they don't let me touch even the Xerox machine. I mean, it's that bad. So, it's called that too.
It's called the printer. Ours happens to be the Xerox brand, but it's not the Xerox machine anymore.
So, with a passion with what you do, but limited in, the fact that I'm paper trace, that is my role, and client relationships is my role, then it's really up to the successors of the firm of how they want to grow organically or strategically. And that's something else I wanted to echo with Elizabeth. There's a lot of us that are aging out of leadership roles, and these are companies to be owned. There is a portfolio, there is a reputation, there is structure. So even though you can do your own, and there's great benefits with that, there's also kicking people like me out or utilizing, long-term changes in your role over time, like Sheila's doing, for example. So look at that too, and I'll echo what Christy said too, or maybe it was you, Rebecca. You've got to demonstrate leadership and that you want to. And the risk is there, but compared to some companies that have a lot of widgets in storage or have a lot of money they've borrowed, you wouldn't be in that position. It's kind of one of the upsides of landscape architecture. It's a low-cost entry. There's not a lot of risk if you manage it correctly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never had a business plan or anything like that. Not really. But anyway, I'm sorry. I'm not very well prepared for this. But yeah, no, we have never made a conscious effort to grow unless we got a big project and needed a couple of people, and that's how we grew. I feel more comfortable when we're at around 13. When we were at 16, it felt out of control. But yeah.
So the one thing I'll say is, as we're looking at this, because we're on this, we are in change. We're not on, I was about to say we're on a precipice, but we're not. We are really starting to look at, okay, had 36, almost 37 great years. What's going to propel us into the next 37? Because we want it to go on beyond us. So our approach to that, I don't know yet if it's strategic or organic. We're working on that. But it does have so much to do with the people that we have in place, and how do we give them the growth opportunities that they're looking for, and what does that mean to us? So stay tuned.
All right.
What's an important distinction between a business that you worked for that shaped your idea of how to run a business and what you do now? Or in other words, like, what's something distinctive that you do your way as a business owner who has that freedom to make those decisions about how to run the practice?
I'll take that. I worked for people that sometimes you didn't know if you were going to get a paycheck or not. And I have never missed payroll. So I pride myself that for 25 years, we've paid people as much as we feel we can and on time. So, but I've always had, a great accountant. I've always had varying levels of office managers, but I have a wonderful office manager that helps with all that. I do know my limits as well. They don't let me with the Xerox machine either, Ann.
Well, my previous company was 50 years old, so I don't know what they were like when they were starting out. So I might not be doing anything different than they did. But one of the things that I have tried to do with my new company is I keep saying I'm going to do the hard stuff first. I'm just going to get the hard stuff baked into the plan. That way, that's the way it is. And so, like, take, for example, parental leave, paid parental leave. I've been like, we couldn't get that far at my last place, but I'm just like, that's just going to be the rule here. If I'm starting this company and I've got a point of view about gender justice, and this is both for men and women, I'm going to have a parental leave, paid parental leave policy. So things like that, I've tried to just take the hard stuff that's hard to do at an older company and just get it baked in from the beginning. So.
All right, there was a couple other questions. There's the woman, yep, she already stood up. She beat ya.
Really good talk. I have a million questions for you guys, but I'll keep it to 2. If you could each talk about just one thing that keeps you up at night, and then also just generally categorize how you spend your day, like percentages of what you do.
About how I spend my day, I no longer manage projects. So my sole goal is to keep building this platform that we've started to build for the other 48 people to be able to pursue their passions and to pursue their careers. And that's been a bit of an adjustment, and it's obviously something I never had any training in. Neither has my partner, and we didn't have a whole lot of experience with what the nitty-gritty of running a business was with our previous firms. So we had to learn a lot of that firsthand.
What keeps you up at night, Margaret?
What keeps me up at night? Well, I do wake up around 3 o'clock and check my email a lot of times. But that's awful. The whole COVID thing kept me up quite a bit, and now, with losing people and frankly feeling some level of responsibility for that I let these people get burnout, and why didn't I see it? I should have seen it coming. And then just trying to relate that to the staff that are with us and making sure they don't get into the same position. That's probably the latest thing that's been keeping me up.
All right. So if you need to hear from Margaret, 2:45 a.m. is the time.
I
So
try
your
not to
email's
send-
at the
I
top.
don't send emails at 3 in the morning.
Am I adding on to that one? So I'd say I tried to take the things that needed to be done at my previous firm of, 150 people, and I tried to proportionalize it all to Lionheart. And we're just creeping up on 10, so that means that I could spend 5 minutes on HR and then 5 minutes on this and 5 minutes on that, because we had people for that at the other firm. And so that is also the thing. So that's how I spend my day, sometimes jumping around too much, from this to this to this to this. And I crave big windows where I can focus, on one thing at a time. And I have tried to say, at least when I'm in a meeting, I'm only going to focus on that one topic. I'm not going to be reading emails and things like that about other projects. That's at least the one thing I can do is try to focus on the meeting I'm in. And that's also the thing that keeps me up at night. When I am flopping around, it's 1 minute, it's this issue, and the next minute is that, and then I got to, So it's very schizophrenic, weird, I don't know.
What keeps me up at night is when something goes wrong, especially when a member of our team has participated in it going wrong, and it keeps them up at night, keeps me up at night. I've often said, when you work on big, important projects, you make big mistakes. It just goes with the territory.
Absolutely.
And more than once, I've said to a client, you're right, fire those humans. We don't need those. Machines can do everything. In other words, it's going to happen. Lawsuits keep me up at night. We were involved in a frivolous lawsuit. I just want to, this is another seminar, but be aware, landscape architecture is now on the radar for lawsuits. You'll get invited to the party just because you're part of the team. They used to think we just did landscaping and they left us alone, but as soon as we started doing grading plans for our civil engineers, as soon as we started shaping detention ponds, just the more you touch it, you get the goo on you. So just be sure you're protecting yourself. We have a folder called critical issues in our documents. And when somebody says, no, we're not going to deal with that clay cap, go ahead and plant right next to the building. Put that in your critical issues folder because you're going to need it. I've done several expert witnesses, been paid to do so for this exact reason. So that keeps me up at night. Typical day, you're right. Fragmented time is the thing that you deal with the most. But I have a lot of support, a lot of great people, like I think we all do. And I think we all share that being torn in several pieces at the same time. I also give away way too much of my time. I sign up for everything. I was Real Estate Council of Austin board chair last year, 1,880 members. It was a full-time job. Not woe is me, I signed up to do it. But I'm really having to do some self-reflection on that because in addition to the pro bono work we do, which I'm very proud of our firm, I'm sure others here do it, we give away a lot of our time for the causes we believe in. But I tend to sign us up for more than we probably should.
I used to worry a lot at night about the office, but with my parents' health, I'm worrying about them at night. But my typical day is definitely doing different things, which it makes it interesting. I mean, 1 minute you're out at a site visit, and I do enjoy that part of it. I find it when we have a big deadline are actually my favorite times because they do allow me to just sit at my desk and draw, which is that's what I like to do. But, the stuff like the lawsuits, by the way, words of the wise, don't use shards of glass and gabions at a children's museum. Now, you guys, this is a frivolous lawsuit. It's the Museum in San Antonio, and it's really over the mechanical engineering. But we have been dragged in because one child in 7 years needed a Band-Aid. So, anyway, but typically I'm out, and I'm working with people in the office. I might be redlining plans. I might be on a Zoom call, same thing all of us are all doing.
Same thing here. So it really is, you bounce around a lot, and that's difficult, so you don't get that focus. And it's the things that you don't No, but you have to stop and make time for them, like, what kind of coffee do we want to drink in the office? You know, but that's important to some people, so you kind of have to stop and make that time for it. So it's really, when people come up and kind of interrupt you, you have to stop and deal with that. What keeps me up at night is just when I go home and I'm like, all right, what did I not do today? My favorite thing these last few months is, what did I fail at today? And I don't say that as a bad thing. Failure is not a bad thing. It is.
Elon Musk says it's a good thing.
Yep. It's true.
All right, there is a gentleman in the black who has been patiently waiting to ask questions.
Chad, thank you, Chad.
Two things. One is an observation, and hopefully I can talk loud enough that everyone can hear. I've been coming to these meetings for about 32 years. I met Christy when I was in college, and and Christy was still in Arizona. And Christy and Margaret and Ann, all three of you, have been heroes of mine, and you have been aspirations. And the difference in this meeting today, this whole conference, versus what this was 32 years ago, is so great and so diverse and so dynamic that I just want to say that I don't care who you are. As practitioners, you have given us aspirations, you have given us milestones, you have, encouraged us and just made us better practitioners. And everyone in this room can be that. Everyone in this room can be that. But I want to say thank you. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to conclude. Sorry I haven't been able to work with the other two of you as much, but the second question I have is, I now work in a larger multidiscipline AE firm, and I lead the landscape architecture group. And I'm challenged now more than ever to try to get it right, for all of our employees. What would be maybe the best piece of advice based off of what we've seen in the last 30 years, maybe where we got it really wrong, that you could give us, in addition to these great examples of practice, of getting it right with people?
We learned this from our planners. You've got to ask them what it is they need, and then you have to really listen, and then you act on it. I don't think that was done maybe 38 years ago, but it can be done now.
I like that. Also, I mean, this is maybe going to sound a little too Brene Brown, but you need to be vulnerable to them. Like I said, if you look like you've got it all together, but inside you're a hot mess, then you failed. You got to tell them what keeps you up at night, If a client's beating you up about something and you come back to the office and don't share any of that, sugarcoat it too much, maybe, you got to be really honest about feedback, to everybody. That way everybody feels like, oh, we're all in this together. She's as worried as I am about this project or work-life fluctuations, which is my new favorite term. And I think that'll help too, just kind of like being vulnerable and talking about your own insecurities about things.
I told Earl today I was going to brag on him a minute, but when I first, everything went badly, and Earl and I sat down and talked, he said, one of the things I want to do is create a firm that can give people enough income to raise their families, take vacations, send their children to college, because landscape architecture in those years was kind of a subset of architecture and didn't even relate to civil engineering. So it was kind of seen as a luxury item and kind of a frivolous item. And so part of what the message is having enough transparency with your team on how things work. You alluded to that, Rebecca. How it works. I'm probably overshare at times, scare the crap out of people. because I feel like it's best to know, what the monster looks like and how to find your way, and realize that we are a business first and foremost. We are consumed by our clients. The clients are not always right. I mean, but you have to deal with that. And so I just think learning how workflow works from the very beginning. When we hire new people, they're project managers day one. They're like, what? And believe me, there are people that argue that this is a good idea. Or not. but I feel like it's good to know right off the bat, a small project. It has a beginning, it has an end. You have to correspond. You have to write good sentences with good grammar. So I think I'm done.
You didn't tell them about your idea for your business name. Anne said her next landscape architecture firm was going to be called Make a Buck Landscape Architecture.
That's true.
So,
We didn't talk money for the longest time.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I've been the best manager. We just, I try to, one of the things I should have said as far as advice is, y'all, people want to work with people that are fun to work with. They don't want to work with sourpusses. And I think that's something to keep in mind. People don't want to work with someone who's, you need to be a team player. But anyway, no, I'm not sure my strong suit has been managing people. I always try to be supportive and, and they certainly hear what's going on because we've always had small open offices, so you hear it all. Although my new office, I'm going to have a hermetically sealed booth. But, yeah, no, I was going to say something, but anyway, I just think, I do, one thing I have done this year, I am now giving a wellness stipend. So come work at Ten Eyck Landscape Architects. And this can go towards a facial. It can go towards your spouses. Your spouse can even use it because when your spouse is well, you are well. Anyway, so I'm trying.
I'm just going to repeat what Margaret said. I think it's really important that you ask and then you listen, and then you have to act on it. And then recognize that we're all humans. Everyone's going through something, and you don't know by looking at them what's going on, so give grace.
I like that. Well, thank you guys all for coming. We appreciate it. We've gone over our time. We're going to get yelled at. So please go enjoy the expo, and thank you, ladies, for all of this. It was great.